the last group meeting of this quarter. And we have two exciting presentations from two seasoned CodeX fellows today. We have Michael Gerges, the founder and CEO of Seso, and Pablo Arredondo, the VP of Research at CaseText, who will be presenting their most recent work to us. And I think it should be a very exciting and interesting discussion. Folks, you have about, each one has half an hour. So for both presentation as well as Q&A. So perhaps you should keep your presentation to about 15 minutes or so. We had a third presentation that unfortunately you had to cancel. Decisis is a new company that will come in, I think, in a maybe a few months, but today unfortunately didn't work out after all. Okay, before we get started, I wanted to see if anyone had any updates or news to share with the group. And okay, Lance is saying he published an article in the Legal Technologist, which covers the topic of agile AI and legal tech. Great, thanks, Lance. Is there a URL to that you could share so people could check it out? But it sounds like an interesting topic. And Nonopa finished a framework program at Legal Innovation Zone. Great. I think, yeah, that's from a Canadian law school, the program. And good. Well, all right. Well, thanks for those updates. So let me turn it over to, I think Michael is getting us started. And so over to you, Michael.
Thank you very much. Everybody, thanks for having me. I am going to be presenting the research that I've done to date for my fellowship. My topic is the impact of technology on US immigration. And so there's three things that I'll go over today, kind of give you guys an update on my research to date, as well as tell you about my company, Seso, which is an immigration technology company on its own right, and then Q&A. So jumping right into the research. So first, I interviewed 4 people so far, and I have a few more interviews that I'd like to do. The 4 people that I interviewed are, one is Mr. Todd Hein, who is the co-founder and CEO of LegalPad, which is a company that's automating the H-1B and I believe the O-1 visa. I interviewed Zhao Wang, who is the co-founder and CEO of Boundless Immigration, which does naturalizations and marriage-based green cards through a self-serve platform. I interviewed Shweta Khandelwal, who's an immigration attorney and very active in the CodeX community and very tech forward. And then I interviewed Trey Stevens. He is currently one of the co-founders of Anduril Industries, which is a company that is building a virtual border wall leveraging sensor technology. And so they won a contract with the US government to do that. He's also an investor at Founders Fund and previously was an early engineer at Palantir. So those are the interviews, as well as talking to other immigration attorneys a little bit more less formally and other entrepreneurs in the space that kind of guided my research, or at least the update to date. So first I want to talk about how is technology impacting immigration lawyers, which I thought would be interesting because many of you on here are probably lawyers and attorneys. And so you're seeing technology impact the legal industry at large, but within immigration, the first thing that I notice as a positive trend is that you have accelerated adoption of software that's meant to improve the accuracy of visa petitions and reduce the costs. So there's case management and practice management software such as INS and Tracker, and these kind of have really grown over the last few years as something that immigration attorneys are trying to leverage. The second thing is that new government systems such as FLAG and the USCIS portal. So these are kind of like systems where you can do your petition, your application, instead of only being able to mail it in. Plus COVID-19, these two trends together have forced a lot of attorneys to adopt electronic filings and e-signatures and more kind of digitized practices. And historically, they've been a bit hesitant to do that. One attorney put it very succinctly: if I do an electronic filing, I'm nervous that I don't have the one source of truth copy of it. What if I do it manually and on paper, then I do have an exact copy of what I've submitted. So there is some concern about doing things digitally. And then lastly, immigration attorneys are often the ones co-founding many of the software companies that are emerging in immigration technology. So some, while many are hesitant, many are actually leading the charge here. And where do I see areas for improvement, or where I think there's going to be more growth and opportunity is one is consumer facing technology. So a lot of what you hear immigration attorneys interested in adopting is related to efficiencies and streamlining their own processes, and less so about creating a tracking platform and kind of a platform for the immigrants themselves to kind of see what's going on and create more transparency there. And I think that's something that has been critical for companies like ours, Seso, like Boundless, and like LegalPad to emerge. And that space has been created by that gap in the market where the immigrant themselves doesn't want to necessarily only rely on email and their attorney for access to information. The second area that I think it needs to be improved is just a mindset shift from immigration attorneys, that I think there is still a lot of fear and distrust for some of the software. And so this software is kind of coming and going to be shifting behaviors, whether or not attorneys want that to happen. And so there needs to be a shift more towards how can we improve the software rather than compete against it? How can we actually, bring this into our work rather than fight it? And then lastly, I think there's actually even more basic resources, both on the software side and the human resource side, that can be adopted more effectively to improve and keep up with all the changes coming through technology. So very basic things such as using more Calendly and Zoom, using Dropbox, and even leveraging paralegals and EAs and outsource support more, I think would actually have a really positive effect on positive improvement on the processes of immigration attorneys and their cost structures. I'll give you an example. I work with 3 different attorneys in my business, and none of them ever asks for an EA or an assistant to get involved in scheduling. So they charge me $900 an hour. So probably they should be using an assistant or outsource support for the scheduling, for example. Xiao had a really good quote when I was speaking to him. He said, there are 10 times more immigration attorneys now than when I came to this country, but annual application flows haven't increased. So someone is winning, but it's not the families. So that was one interesting perspective to hear. The second area is, how is technology impacting immigrants themselves? So again, focusing on the positive trends first, you're seeing more access to information, so streamlined access and aggregation. So for Boundless, for example, one of the things that's really powerful about their service is it first informs you on what is the process, what is this black box that you're entering, if you want to try and get naturalization or get a marriage-based green card. So kind of focusing on knowledge and information is actually like essential to their model. LegalPad has a really great weekly newsletter that they send out, and a lot of immigration attorneys do this as well. But I think this is something that that these tech companies have really capitalized on. And then our company, we have the biggest Facebook group in the country for H-2A visa workers, and we don't actually post that much staffing opportunities there. Really, what drives it is just posting valuable knowledge on the visa process, on the consulate process, on how to interact with employers and reach employers that are looking for H-2A workers. So just really kind of democratizing the information that is historically been really hard to get is super important here. The second thing that I think is a really positive trend is that we've improved transparency and created a single source of truth throughout the application process. So if you are interacting with your attorney or with the government and you're doing phone calls and you're mailing things and you don't have one source of truth, one kind of website or dashboard that has your application, that tracks every edit, that tracks what's being submitted to the government and then what the response is, it's a lot harder, it's a lot less transparent of a process. And so that's kind of been the most, one of the most obvious improvements for immigrants is if you're using these technology platforms, you have a lot more clarity on what's going on and what's being submitted. And then it's also reduced the cost to apply. So I think Boundless is probably the best example of this, where the cost to apply for a visa or a green card using a self-serve program is substantially less. And obviously there are trade-offs that come with that. but that's something that has been very beneficial for immigrants. And then areas of improvement here. So first, I think the communication between an immigrant, a visa applicant, a green card applicant, and the government is still highly limited and very intransparent. You can't reach USCIS by calling a number. It's not just an easy process to navigate. Even our company, which is an agent for employers and workers getting the H-2A visa, when we had an issue with USCIS, we actually had to call a congresswoman and really kind of call the office several times to get her involved, because there's no really clear, easy way to reach USCIS. So this is very much an intransparent process, even though the technology exists that we should be able to, have all the different stakeholders communicating more effectively. Second is there's still not a norm that we're going to move all of these applications and these signatures to e-signatures and digital submissions. That's very much not an expected norm yet. Although COVID-19 has definitely accelerated that opportunity, and for the first time, USCIS accepts e-signatures and copies of signatures instead of wet signatures that are mailed from foreign countries to the U.S. But it's unclear if that's going to be a change that remains. And then procedural delays can be avoided if we can better leverage technology. So this is something that some of this is policy and some of this is just inefficiencies. So instead of requiring biometric appointments for immigrants who are doing a visa status change or getting a work permit authorization or applying for a driver's license, allowing different agencies to share this data that they already have. They already have these biometric data, and yet we're requiring it. I think it is quite inefficient. And then the last kind of concern here to flag is the AI has not necessarily caught up to the status of some self-service platforms. So if you're applying for a fairly complicated or nuanced visa, then you want to be very careful in selecting what in a self-serve platform versus going with a traditional attorney. That's also true for incorporating companies in other areas where law and technology are emerging, and as someone who's kind of trying to be tech forward, you can get caught in some traps. I thought Shweta had a really great quote when I spoke to her about all of this. And she said, immigrant-facing software can help establish one source of truth for your documents and for your information. It's similar to medical records. This can help prevent unintended mistakes, but nuanced cases should still be supplemented by a legal mind. And so kind of that hybrid model of leveraging software, but still working with experienced legal minds in immigration is going to be important for the foreseeable future. And then kind of lastly, how is technology impacting U.S. immigration policy? Notice I've got a lot more bullets for the areas of improvement than for the positive trends. So there are some positive trends. The digital submission platforms that have emerged. So FLAG, for example, the foreign labor and foreign labor application gateway is a new system that was released in end of 2019 to allow people to apply digitally for work-based visas, seasonal visas. And then the USCIS portal is relatively new as well. And these are steps in the right direction, but again, these are not the norm. These are not, the entire process is still not digitized. There's been more accurate and actionable data that governments are leveraging through companies like Anduril, and these are improving the enforcement of policy. So what they're not doing is influencing the creation of policy. So I don't think tech companies are driving policy creation, but they are driving a lot of the enforcement of policy, just giving access to more data. In the case of Anduril, for the first time, their software in areas along the southern border, their sensors allow you to better track people going and coming. So all they're doing is saying, hey, let's try and create a denominator for how many people have gone into the US and out of the US on this border. And let's actually have real data to leverage for us to make decisions. And those decisions could be related to enforcement by the Border Patrol. It can also be related to how many migrants are entering a city and what do we need to do to ensure that we're supporting safe practices for those migrants in those cities. We need to know how many people are actually coming and going in different parts of the border. And then lastly, technology companies are informing immigration policy. And so IBM, Microsoft, and Intel have all supported pathways to citizenship for dreamers. They also have revealed problems with certain immigration policy and certain ways our visa system works. For example, there has been some controversy around some of these large tech companies really applying for H-1B visas for their workforce in mass amounts, and really flooding the system and making it harder for smaller companies to use the existing system. And so that's brought to light issues with the system. But tech companies are the ones leading those kind of leading the charge on drawing to light what's the problem with the existing system. And then the areas for improvement, I think, are many here. I think we're far behind, we being the US, are far behind countries like Canada and the UAE and Germany, which leverage data to make immigration policy decisions. So when Canada is looking at bringing in workers on different visas, they look at all of the different segmentations of a fintech computer programmer, whereas the US hasn't really modernized our visa categories in a long time. So the USCIS, the certifying officer reviewing your application, you know, I've heard stories of computer programmers getting denied because they didn't have a bachelor's degree. But you know, so our categorizations don't kind of appreciate the value of computer programmers in our society, and whether or not a bachelor's degree should be the right way to evaluate whether someone is you know, should be eligible for a visa. Second, we should be creating APIs to streamline data transfers and filings. So the IRS has done a great job with this, and you know, TurboTax is really effective because of those APIs. They don't really exist with the other government systems that are related to immigration. And then, you know, this is, I think, a big one across the board, is just to build fiber optic networks in smart cities. This would allow for broader tech adoption by local governments and all the federal agencies involved in all these processes. Investing in digitizing the USCIS caves. So all of the records that USCIS keeps are in giant caves in DC. So we have physical records, and all of that should be digitized. The Obama administration attempted to in 2015 and wasn't able to. And we haven't really seen an attempt since. This isn't really a politics thing. This is just kind of figuring out how do we invest in this effectively, and what is the value of having all these digital records so that we don't lose these physical copies. And then another big one, I think, is streamlining the bidding process and kind of democratizing the bidding process for technology vendors. So Anduril is kind of a new entrant into getting to get a big government contract. Palantir is another one, and SpaceX is another one. So these are kind of the success stories. But what do they all have in common? These three companies are all started by billion-dollar founders. So these guys are already kind of quite successful, very well connected. And these are three of there's almost no company has won a large contract in the last 30 years that wasn't a traditional player like a Lockheed or a Northrop Grumman or a Boeing. So the exception are these kind of companies that are very well connected. So it's not easy for a small tech company to come in and bid for a government contract and actually have the opportunity to add value. And so that's something that needs to be democratized. In my interview with Trey, I really liked his quote. He said, "Do I think technology has shaped policy? No, I haven't seen that happen. And Congress isn't even aware of all the technology that they have access to. Technologists should be out in front of historical policy decisions." A really good example is Elon not wanting to put side mirrors on cars because they have 360-degree cameras. So maybe you've heard this story. Tesla initially didn't have the side mirrors, and then they had to add it because of federal law, even though there wasn't really a logical reason for it. So technology should be pushing the boundaries of policy and really influencing policymakers by kind of creating innovative technologies rather than just through lobbying. So that's kind of the research that I've done to date. The next steps for me are I'm trying to interview additional policymakers. So a few of the people that I'm in touch with about this are the former Secretary of State, a current California senator, some Congress folks, and then former mayors in Los Angeles and Miami. I also have interviews scheduled with more immigration attorneys and immigration tech entrepreneurs. And I wanted to give a quick update on the company as well. So I'm going to go through that relatively quickly, and so I can leave time for questions. So first I wanted to kind of share with you what Seso does. So Seso is an immigration technology company. And it's also a labor marketplace for agricultural workers. So we connect farm workers from abroad with farms in the US, automate a visa to bring them in legally, the H-2A visa, and then kind of help with recruiting, consular services, transportation, and compliance. And that's kind of our current service offering. Long term, we want to be the one-stop shop for farms to get foreign labor and to do all of the different activities involved with labor management. So payroll, insurance brokerage, and then on the worker side, we're investing in building software for remittances and banking many of these unbanked workers and allowing them to keep more of their paycheck rather than spending it so much of it on payday lenders and remittance services that are kind of predatory. One of the things that I learned is that you can't build an immigration technology, a legal tech company without working with great lawyers that understand the industry. So we work with 3 very large attorneys that know the space very well. And it's really hard to break into a new industry and build a kind of vertically integrated company without having that legal support and that industry knowledge. And just wanted to show you some of the software. So an employer would come in and create a petition, and they could create multiple petitions. And then they can track everything about those petitions in our software, as well as all the records they would need to stay compliant with the DOL, Department of Labor audit. So we kind of track everything that the government, the flag system asks for. We pre-fill it based on the data that the Department of Labor provides about these employers, and then let them edit it. And this is the source of truth I mentioned earlier. So everything that they want to know, everything that is going to be submitted, they get to review, and they get to we get to be on the same page. There's no question marks. There's no, oh, there was a mistake that I wasn't aware of. So it's full transparency. And then, on that same line of transparency is we have a timeline where we are updating the employer and the workers with the status of the application, whether it's being reviewed by the Department of Labor or the US CIS or Department of Homeland Security. If your workers are on the way to the consulate, what's happening at the consulate. So just creating a lot of transparency in the software. And then kind of records of all of the different documents you need to be tracking for compliance. And we work with farms that have done the H-2A visa program for 20 years and have said, you know what, I don't need to use my immigration attorney anymore. I can use a software company that's kind of enabling me. And we've worked with people who are brand new to the industry who said, I'm paying too much to the immigration attorney, and so let me try using a software service. To summarize some of my learnings, it's very important for us to partner with labor and immigration attorneys with the right industry experience. We want to create tools beyond just the visa application, and that's the only way to really earn the trust and support of our customers. And then it was really important for us to build relationships at the consulates as well. And currently, we're the 3rd largest H-2A agent in California. We have 100% acceptance rates with our applications because we're selective with who we work with, and we kind of focus on only working with people that care about labor compliance. We've already done 700 visas this year and expect to do over 2,000 this year. And we grew the team from just me last year to now 15 full-time and 4 part-time, and raised a few $1 million in funding led by Founders Fund and NFX. And now I'll open it up to questions.
Great, thanks, Michael. This is it's been very interesting, and I appreciate you giving us the lay of the land of all the things that are going well and the things that are not going well in the immigration tech space at the moment. And we have a bunch of folks already asking questions in the chat, so maybe I'll just kind of share them with you. Jana's first question is, she's curious about, why if we scan our fingerprints, that gets compared to a stored image. Why do we have to? Why do they expire, basically? And Warren's kind of also asking, sort of giving an example from his own experience where he was serving as a trustee and he had to renew his fingerprints.
Yeah. Sort
of like, do you have any insight on that?
Yeah, I can only give you my opinion, which is that some of that stuff is politics. Some of that stuff is let's increase the procedures if we can't pass policies that we want to limit migration. And so you saw some of that in the last administration where the procedural stuff increased. I don't think there's a logical reason why you would need to require biometric scanning and fingerprints if you already have that data. But that's my opinion. I don't know the science.
Got it. That's I think it's a logical explanation. Jana is also asking, how do you evaluate that the tech itself is indeed speeding the application or granting process, i.e. independently of other factors like policy changes? Also, how do you protect personal information in case of a hack? You cannot redact personal identifiable information.
Yeah.
Essentially in taking decisions.
Yeah, I think Jana brings up a really, really good point, which is that you could build all the most amazing software and technology in the world as a private sector, from the lens of the private sector, and you're still at the whims of the government. You're still at the whims of the certifying officers and the application process, and so we can't speed that up. We can't really affect that. That's why we had to reach out to congressmen and congresswomen when we had issues. So that's the biggest concern, is how do we get government to adapt the technology on the other side as fast as we as the immigration lawyer, tech company, immigrant are adopting it. And then in terms of protecting personal information, so for us, we use the same technology stacks that hospitals use for HIPAA compliance. So we kind of rely on just like the latest and greatest technology in terms of data security and data storage. I am not technical enough to tell you what that technology is called.
Cool. So I think the next question was already answered by Julie. So Nonopa is asking, what sets you apart from other immigration tech? And Julie, who is herself one of the leading experts in immigration law and also an immigration tech entrepreneur, and one of the leading minds in that area, she's saying Seso is the only immigration tech that is especially suited for the seasonal and farm workers. The H-2A visa process differs from many others, making it simpler. Seso helps keep the cost and labor down in getting approvals. Wow, you should use that testimonial for yourself.
Yeah, that's good. I like it a lot.
Sorry, I had to jump off, but I just wanted to make sure in case you didn't get a chance to answer that. It's really,
Thank you so much.
It's looking great.
Thank you so much. I mean, the only thing I'd add to that is we're very much focused on one vertical. We thought about expanding to H-2B and we decided not to. We're not trying to be a horizontal immigration tech platform and compete for the H-1Bs and the O-1s. So our approach is pretty unique in that we're saying the H-2A visa is grown 300%. It's expected to continue growing. Right now, it's 10% of the seasonal labor force in agriculture. I've spoken to economists and the CEOs of some of the biggest agriculture companies in the country, and they've all kind of have the consensus that H-2A visas could be 50% of the labor force. And so, and if there is an amnesty bill, which is, there's many being floated around, a lot of people outside the industry think, oh, that means that you're going to have all of these migrant workers now here legally, and so that's going to flood the market with labor. It's the opposite. And when Reagan had amnesty for farm workers in '86, you actually saw that 70% of them left agriculture. So agriculture is the hardest job in the world, physically on your body. So if you can get out of agriculture, you typically do. You go into construction, food and retail, and then the gig economy. So people don't want their kids working in the fields. They want step up opportunities. And so the H-2A visa is kind of bringing in foreign workers to not replace domestic workers, but to supplement the shortage of domestic workers. And the incentives are all aligned because a worker coming on an H-2A visa is traditionally making about 10x more money in the US than they're making back home. They're coming legally. They don't have to go through the dangers of crossing illegally. And they get housed and they get food and transportation paid for. So there's a tremendous amount of benefits, and you have legal status and you can get healthcare. So all of these things are quite positive, and then you're sending most of that money back home in remittances. So you have 95% of that money going back in remittances. So you have a purchasing power parity of $40, $45 an hour for folks coming from Latin America versus the $15 an hour that you're getting paid in the US. So it kind of makes sense that H-2A is growing. And so we're building a vertically integrated company or vertical SaaS company around everything related to that visa.
So Michael, maybe the last question before we have to turn it over to the next speaker. So you came to this, very much from the background of your prior career as we were a management consultant, right? I think you worked for McKinsey.
Yeah.
And so you were and you're not you weren't an immigration lawyer before, but you have I think a cousin or a sister-in-law or something who runs a like an organic farm, right? And that's sort of
Yeah.
what made you discover that need. And so sorry, I have some background noise here. So I'm just wondering as to how what was sort of the biggest challenge and obstacle that you encountered in sort of breaking into this? I think you were kind of, as I remember, you were sort of interviewing different people and so on.
Yeah.
But I would be curious to know what sort of the biggest entry barrier for you to get that legal tech company kicked off.
Yeah, I mean, when I first started this, as you said, I got the idea from spending time with my cousin, who's an organic farmer in the Central Valley, and she wanted to purchase land next door, and she couldn't find the labor to pick the land that she was going to for harvesting, and she's married to a farm worker who came here a while back, and he is the one who told me about the H-2A visa. He said in Mexico we treat this like gold if you're a farm worker, and so that's when I kind of went deep into it and learned that it's grown 300%. It's a very convoluted process. The biggest challenges when I'm working with farms is breaking the bonds, breaking the relationship they have with their attorney, with their agent, with the farm association they work with to get this paperwork done. I initially called some of the biggest immigration attorneys, and they kind of laughed at me. They didn't call me back. They didn't really believe the software was going to add a ton of value, and the farms didn't. But when I showed the software to the farms, they were all pretty excited about it. They were just nervous about breaking the bond and breaking the relationship with the immigration attorney. So it takes a lot of time with the employers and to get them to kind of test out this new system. And then everyone that we've converted to us has given us multiple contracts and kind of has looked back. So yeah, there's a personal side to it that software can't replace.
That's great. I think that's a very interesting background, and appreciate you sharing that with us. I appreciate you presenting today and giving us an update on your work. And it's super exciting, and I hope you keep us posted. And yeah, thank you. So a quick round of applause. It's great to have you. Let me
quickly, Michael, if you want to drop your email into chat, people can follow up your great presentation directly if they like.
Yeah, I'll do that right now.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Michael. All right. So Pablo, are you there?
I am here.
Okay.
And it says the host won't let me share my video.
I think
my
maybe
guess is you've seen my lack of a haircut and you're trying to spare everyone, but
let's see.
There we go. Start my video. All right.
There you go. So Pablo, oh my God.
I feel compelled to say that this lack of a haircut does not represent the views of CaseTech, the company. This is a personal decision, and the vaccine is coming soon.
Wow, it's cool. I like it. I like it. It's just unexpected. It shows me that I haven't seen you in a while. So anyways, it's great to see you, Pablo. But anyway, so Pablo hardly needs any introduction. He is really, been a CodeX fellow from the very early days, and he's just a force of nature in the legal innovation space, and has created many groundbreaking headline grabbing and problem solving products, and so I'm excited to hear about what you've been up to recently. So over to you, Pablo.
All right, thank you. And thank you all for a chance to talk about our latest efforts at CaseText. Roland said, my name is Pablo Arredondo. I'm the co-founder and chief product officer at CaseText and CodeX fellow. And, those of you who've been kind of known me in CodeX, at least over the last years, have noticed that I just can't stop shutting up about BERT and about transformer-based neural nets, these breakthroughs in natural language processing, which, for the first 6 years that I was putting my shoulder to legal tech just weren't there. But now I have arrived, and I think are really opening up new possibilities and just basically creating a lot of value for attorneys, making them both more efficient and able to find things that they might have overlooked, which shouldn't surprise us because language is, of course, law is a castle built of language. And to some extent, language was a moat that kept out some of the tech that might be applied. And so any gains, much less the sort of big gains that you saw with the advent of this latest stuff, BERT and its progeny, it shouldn't surprise us that we're seeing it, do a lot of good. So my colleague Javed and I, a few months ago, presented Parallel Search, which was the use of this technology in the context of case law research. I'll do a very quick refresher. A search engine where instead of having to write a complex Boolean, and where you're of course at the mercy of your keywords, or even what they used to call natural language search, which was just casual Fridays in the prison of the keyword, right? It was still very much at the mercy of your keyword. Parallel search lets you use a complete sentence exactly of the type that you might argue to a judge, right? It was designed so that you could copy and paste directly from your brief, from your memo. If the partner sends the associate a email saying go find support for this. And more importantly, it's able to find you conceptual matching even if the words aren't the same. So here I searched McVader's termination of Skywalker for refusal to wear a mask cannot be construed as discriminatory. Of course, as humans, it's very easy for us to read this and to kind of break it into its underlying concepts, right? You have an employee who said, no, I won't wear this or that apparel or safety equipment, was fired and is raising whether or not that was discriminatory. But for computers, for algorithms, it's very difficult to be able to match. And really, I think prior to BERT, basically impossible for them to be able to match reliably that here in this instance where it's somebody refusing to wear a non-uniform sweater or jacket, and the question of whether or not that was because of her race, or down here, it wasn't termination, it was adverse employment action, and it wasn't a mask, it was a hard hat that was the safety equipment in that instance. Here, brazen glasses, and so on and so on. Again, extremely easy for us as humans to look at that and say, yep, that's the same kind of gist, that's what's going on, but just no technology before it, that, to my knowledge at least, came even close to doing it. This is not about putting in a thesaurus and kind of having some basic ability to do synonyms. This is conceptual matching of a real nature. So we released this, and I have never seen anything quite like how well this has been taken up by attorneys. Everything from the skyscrapers of Manhattan to the strip malls of Pasadena. CaseText, we have clients that are both AmLaw, small law, mid-sized. Everyone just really took to it very well. Again, perhaps not surprisingly, given how much keyword has been weighing us down when it came to legal research. And it was the enthusiasm quickly became one of these things where you were really happy, and then you started saying, well, wait a minute, I want more than what this is. Specifically, the question was, let me point this same technology at other things in my life, right? It's great that I have this for case law. Case law is but one corpus, one species of content that litigators have to navigate all the time. And there are many others. There are entire industries devoted to some of these other ones, be they e-discovery, knowledge management, sort of other things like that. So, we said, okay, well, let's take a look at it. We had done some early tests looking at briefs that had worked well. And so, one of the first things, in fact, I think I'll show it this way. Give me a second to pull up this guy. One of the first things we looked at was, in fact, e-discovery, because that's obviously a big, there's a lot of information retrieval needs when it comes to, searching through the thousands, sometimes tens of thousands, millions of documents that come in. And as some of you probably know already, there's a sort of publicly available corpus whenever you want to test e-discovery, and that's the Enron corpus. The Enron corpus, they released all the documents produced. 1 second, we're going to have our little BBC moment. Hey, welcome back from school. Do you have fun? Yes. All right, high five. You did, all right. So they actually released to the public all of the emails and everything that was turned over in Discovery. And so whenever you want to show off something in Discovery, you use the Enron corpus. And so we loaded up 250,000 emails. And so what you're looking at here is essentially the same technology that we used in parallel search for case law, pointing not at case law, but at emails from Enron. And you see something like, I feel uneasy about this. And again, that almost eerie ability to understand the concept. Now, I put understand in air quotes. It's a machine. All machines are quite stupid. It doesn't understand anything, but it acts like it does. And for attorneys, that can go a long way. I'm kind of nervous about this one. It feels weird. I'm pretty nervous. I'm uncomfortable. I'm a little confused. All sorts of different ways that scared me a bit. I had a bad feeling. all sorts of different articulations of that same sort of concept. Again, things that we as humans have no problem seeing that it's the same, but prior to these breakthroughs, you would be lucky if you could get like 50% of these different articulations by trying a long Boolean, and of course you would miss some as well. Okay, so that was in the sort of early validation of e-discovery. We built some sort of one-off prototypes for some clients that wanted e-discovery, but the requests kept coming. People kept saying, I want it for other things. I want to search my expert reports. I want to search my transcripts. I've been litigating for 20 years and there's nothing I haven't already seen before. So I want to be able to search through all of my work product over the last 20 years. So basically people wanted to point the neural net at whatever they wanted to point the neural net at. And that's what led to WeSearch, which is the current working name. We just came out of beta with it. We have attorneys using it at big firms and small firms. And what WeSearch basically is a build your own neural net. It basically, my little, forgive the sloganing, is I want to make it as easy to hand out neural nets as it is to hand out yellow legal pads. And so the way it works is you say like, okay, let's say, and I'm going to risk a live real demo here on this. Let's say right now we have a wonderful website for Stanford. It's got blog posts. It's great. You are at the mercy of your keyword when you search through the blog posts of Stanford Law School. So let's say I just wanted to say, Stanford blog posts, continue. Now this is a very small sample. It is designed to work a lot more, but what you see here is just like a handful of the blog posts, and we'll get into the scaling in a second. I'm going to drag and drop it here. And it does take a bit because it's now loading. It's uploading them, and then of course it's converting them into the sublime multi-dimensional vector space that enables neural net to do what it does. It says the engine is ready now, and let's see. I will search. You will know that I gathered this one before. I'm going to search that America's many laws can be intimidating. Now that exact sentence does not appear. But just yesterday, Professor Janensarith wrote a blog post about the sheer number and size of regulations and how they are daunting. So that is WeSearch demonstrated, right? From just files on a computer to the ability to search it and with all of the power of conceptual matching in seconds when it's a relatively small corpus. We've now had instances of this where people are using thousands, tens of thousands, even hundreds of thousands of documents. And it's just incredible to see how quickly attorneys are using it for all the ones we kind of thought of, but then for things that we didn't think of, right? Let me see if I can go back here. So, transactional attorneys who work in contract law, I've been almost proud about how much I've neglected and not thought about those folks during my 10 years in legal tech, because litigation is nuanced. It needs its own things. And I thought, somebody else can deal with contractual, with transactional law and contracts. However, we sort of stumbled to demoing this to some contract attorneys, is the word, attorneys who work in contracts, so transactional attorneys. And they said that actually the ability to input a clause from a contract or a question about a contract and then define the relevant language from other contracts. Again, not shocking, but that was something that apparently is a relatively unsolved problem for them. I do think there are companies making progress there. So here is, again, a neural net pointing not at case law, not at the Enron emails, not at Stanford posts, but at a database of like 300 contracts. I search if a terrorist attack disrupted the supply chain, would a company still be liable? And, it brings you to the force majeure clauses, talking about, if not terrorism, disasters and acts of war and things like that, right? So again, that same ability. So really, across the board, we've now seen that putting this technology in people's hands, making it effortless for them to basically go from the old world of a keyword index to the new world of a 100-dimensional vector space is something that seems to be catching on. It seems to be something that they're putting to good use. And it's very early days, but anyone with a Case-Text account can now go do a free trial of this and test it themselves. We're still focused on lawyers. We do have some folks that are coming from outside of law looking, Y Combinator, you have like fellow companies that want to do stuff like let us use this on our security reviews and things like that. So there are starting to be some creeping non-law use cases coming up, but we remain devoted to our group, which is attorneys. And that is my song and dance on this. It is very early days. And but to me, nothing, if you're really into BERT the way I've been, you almost inevitably end up here trying to just throw it at everybody for anything that they want. So
it's very cool, Pablo. Thank you. And it's very powerful. And I like this idea of giving everyone his own neural net, like you hand out legal pads. Carl's asking if you train your BERT model or use a standard one.
So the answer is yes. Great question. So you can use the off-the-shelf one for a lot of the use cases. We used, generally the one we've been using is one that we trained on law specifically. So it went through all the pre-training tasks with common law, judicial opinions. But we then had one instance where somebody had a really domain specific thing with it was e-discovery in the pharma context. And it was working okay, but little things like neurodegenerative and brain erosion or something where it was it was acting like it wasn't able to grasp certain concepts that were unique to that domain. So another thing we're working on is one-click ability to then retrain the model on your specific corpus where indicated. So so I put in Title 35. I'm a patent litigator by training. And I put in Title 35 just to be like, yep, it works there. I used research to do it. We have yet to actually put this live across our entire collection of codified law. That's very much coming. There's no reason to think it won't work. But so the short answer is no. The federal acquisition rules, I don't know what those are, I confess. But I will tell you this, and this is kind of gets to the nature of what I'm trying to show you guys. I don't know what they are, but I do know, Bruce, you could go drag and drop them into research this afternoon, and then you'll have a neural net pointed at them. Provided searchable PDF, Microsoft Word, or text file. We haven't built in yet the OCR to it. Yes, Bruce, I hope you'll let us all know how that goes. Yeah, that's the idea is, all of these have you aimed it at. The idea is we don't need to aim anymore. We just give you guys the weapon.
That is very cool. So, and how much effort did it take for you to train that model, and how long have you been tinkering with that?
So, and I think my colleague Javed, it's interesting. He I saw iPhone Javed. He literally might be in the hospital. He told me his baby was due any minute. So, but the model took some tinkering. Making it scalable was a lot of what the work was, and making it performant, making it fast. And that's important because, some folks, they claim it's scalable, their versions, but it's a little bit of hand waving, because what they really do is first they run a keyword search, and then they use the neural net to re-rank what comes back, right? But of course, if you start with a keyword search first, you've already given away the store, as it were, right? Like if I say only Harlem Globetrotters are eligible to be president, and then I let everybody vote, you can hardly call that democracy, right? In the true sense of it, right? And so to make it so that it's truly end-to-end scalable, so that you're immediately using full conceptual search over the, for case law, with 8-10 million documents, hundreds of millions of sentences. That's where a lot of the work and the special sauce was put in. Again, if you go back to our talk we gave last time about the case law engine, Javed does a much better job of getting into some of the details there, to the extent he was at liberty too. And then, we've tried to set it up so that training it on a specific domain like pharma is actually really quick. Cool. All right.
And so, Pablo, what's your idea around the business model around this? Is this something people subscribe to, or it's a free resource? And how's this?
So unfortunately, free is something we can't do, both because it does cost
business.
money.
All right, these university people, they always ask those naive questions.
If I had my way, I think the business model right now is we're setting it up so that anyone can spin it up and load up to a gigabyte, I think for about $100 a month. And then depending on the clients and the situations, like if there's a special e-discovery thing, we're working out special things with them as well. But yeah, we're trying, like everything we do at CaseText, to just have really good tech that's affordable for attorneys across the spectrum, not just for the ones at the with the deepest pockets.
All right, just a few more questions from folks. Warren saying where the recording of this session will reside. So we put those usually in our CodeX YouTube channel. It should be there in the very near future. And then Colin is saying, fascinating. How does case text address user concerns about the privacy of the docs they upload?
Yep, secure Amazon Cloud. If the cloud's a deal breaker, that it's over, we're finding less and less that that's a concern.
Okay. Jana is saying, not to mean to undermine the work or play the devil's advocate, but isn't building a model the easiest part in machine learning? In other words, when something goes wrong, performing proper evaluation, error analysis, etc., what are people going to do?
Okay, well, first, Jana, you're at the law school, so you should never feel like you need to apologize for undermining or playing the devil's advocate. That's just, that's par for the course. If what you're saying is, isn't it, how do you evaluate? I guess I'm wondering if you mean like on the user side or on our side. Certainly, neural nets are a whole different animal when it comes to tinkering, right? I remember the days where we could go in a room with our search engine and say, what if we weight citation count this much and length of document this much, and you could feel like you were doing all this stuff. Neural nets largely a black box. It's a much bigger deal when you're trying to experiment with different aspects of how you might change it in the pre-training tasks and the vocabulary and things like that. So yes, I think if what you're saying is, doesn't a lot of work have to go into iterating models to make them better and better? I think absolutely. If in terms of the attorneys, so far they've been pretty happy with the results they're getting. I will say one thing to note though, that and some of you might have caught it, you notice we also put in here the fallback of keyword search. Sometimes you might just want something that you just don't want any concept matching, you don't want anything fancy. And we do allow you to kind of revert back if you need traditional Boolean to do it. So maybe this is getting at what you're saying a little bit, which is if you're having trouble with the parallel search, you can sort of kick back to the other kind of search. So that's one sort of safety thing we have. And then, yeah, we'll be looking for user feedback about it. And, there's always things you can do to try to make the models better generally.
Mark is asking, are you still raising capital?
Entrepreneur, we always are and aren't, let's DM me later, we can talk.
Okay. All right. And then Nonopa is asking whether you plan to expand into other jurisdictions like South Africa, for instance.
I would love to. Not immediately. There's different levels of that with CaseText. I mean, some of the stuff we're doing, like our earlier work, like CARA, things like that, anywhere you had a common law system with judicial, a lot of it would be directly applicable to any system like that. The latest stuff, the neural net stuff, was trained on English and, with American text, et cetera, et cetera. So I don't know how one-to-one that would go to South Africa. But you can certainly try it. You can create an account and take text that you're interested in and try them. But in terms of like business roadmap, unfortunately, we're not yet at a place to go global. Okay.
Well, cool. So Pablo, this is so I don't see any other questions. I think it's really fascinating, and you mentioned Kara, which is for you is already an old innovation, right? It's been it's fairly recent, and it's sort of it's been, I think, very sort of trailblazing in its own right. And what's so exciting to see you present is that you're just such a well of new cool projects in legal tech, and so we're very excited that you could share research with us, and it's very cool to see how this works. It makes a ton of sense, and and thank you so much for joining us. I think we can wrap up a little earlier if there's no more questions, but if you could perhaps thanks. Yeah, you too bad. Put your email in the text. This was gonna ask. And folks, thank you all for joining us again. This was our last session, and a great session for the quarter. And we'll take we're going to be teaching our computational law class in the spring quarter, and so we're taking a short break from our sort of regular weekly schedule. We will have some ad hoc meetings coming up, so please check your inbox. And also, as Susan already shared in the text, join us for Future Law. Our Future Law conference will be all digital this year on April 8th. Please register. We have fantastic lineup of people. And we have, Alan Kay as our keynote, who's one of the, very, very prominent computer scientists. And Pablo will be there, and a really fantastic lineup of people who are really pushing forward, I think, the state of the art in legal technology and legal innovation. So we're thrilled. For us, this is a big moment. We are a bit disappointed, of course, that we can't have the live portion. We're not hosting the conference at Stanford Law School this year. It's going to be completely virtual, as I said. But we already have a ton of registrations, because it allows us to reach, people that would otherwise not come to be able to come to the live event. So that's maybe the silver lining in the whole thing, and it will be a great event. So please join us for that, and thank you all for all our speakers. For today, Michael and Pablo, it was fantastic to have you, and thanks for sharing with the group and having this really exciting conversation. And thank you for all the participants for kind of coming and joining and asking your questions throughout the quarter. And we look forward to seeing you at Future Law and at some of our upcoming things that we have sort of sprinkled throughout the spring quarter. All right, so thank you all. Good to see you, and we'll be in touch. All right, guys, thank you all. Bye-bye.